The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
New data on jobs. There is growth in the number, but wages, well, they're falling behind due to inflation. Meanwhile, grad students at Harvard end their longest strike in union history. And today on the show, the Communication Workers of America. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 10th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Frank Mathews will be our featured guest on the show today. He serves as Administrative Director for District 4 of the Communication Workers of America, CWA-union.org. And if you go to that website, you can read about what happened recently with AT&T Orange Mobility workers, all represented by the CWA. They have ratified a new contract covering 9,000 workers in customer service, retail, tech support across 36 states and the District of Columbia. And that also includes Frank's district. We'll talk about what they were able to achieve at the bargaining table. We're also going to talk about the CWA Worker Power Agenda. Last week, the CWA held their legislative and political conference in Washington the entire first week of June, and they came out with an agenda. This is pretty powerful, pretty simple, too. Good jobs and strong unions, number one. Affordable, reliable health care. Stopping corporations from ripping us off. Ending corporate corruption of our political system. And each of those categories, each one, they have specific legislation that's pending in the halls of Congress that would fix those things I just talked about. Once again, you got to make sure you get the right people in office to make sure the worker power agenda gets accomplished, and that's exactly what we're going to talk to Frank about. Altogether, there's 17 pieces of legislation that would help workers. 17 pieces of legislation, good legislation. CWA-union.org is the website that you want to go to. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. We're talking $38 billion of assets under advisement. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. On Friday, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, better known as the BLS, reported that the U.S. economy added 172,000 jobs last month, indicating a pretty resilient labor market. As expected, the education and healthcare sectors were among the largest contributors to the reported growth, as well as a more surprising gain of 70,000 positions in the leisure and hospitality industry. Now, there's more. Although the national unemployment rate remained unchanged at 4.3%, there are concerns about wage growth falling behind inflation as inflation continues to grow. According to the report, average hourly earnings have increased by 3.4% over the last year, coming up short of the 3.8% inflation rate reported in April. And we'll get more on inflation later this week from the Department of Labor. Meanwhile, the Harvard Graduate Students Union, which is affiliated with the United Auto Workers, has ended their longest strike in union history. This was after 40 days. Strike began April 21st, saw grad student workers withhold their labor through the end of the semester, disrupting classes and grading for undergraduate students and sustaining picket lines that impacted admitted students' visiting days and commencement ceremonies. Sadly, the strike ended without a settled contract. Following a membership vote, in which 81% of participating union members chose to return to work. Union leadership moved to end the strike after Harvard showed new willingness to move on key provisions regarding pay parity between research assistants and teaching fellows, paid family and medical leave, and discrimination and harassment grievance processes in their recent bargaining sessions. The vice president of the union, Evan Lemire, stated, and this is a quote, "This strike was not ended because the fight's over. The fight's not over. And we're going to be continuing to fight for a new contract. It's just going to take a little more time." The Senate has scheduled a hearing for today for the Trump administration's most recent National Labor Relations Board nominee. That would be James Macy, the director of the Department of Labor's Office of Workers' Compensation Programs, which stands to be the critical third Republican member of the Labor Board. Now, he will appear before the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions for the hearing before potentially moving to a full Senate confirmation floor vote. The committee will also consider David Prouty, the board's lone Democratic member, for renomination to a second 5-year term. Now, if Macy wins confirmation, the new Republican majority board will likely target Biden-era board precedents. According to Bloomberg Law, this includes the Cemex decision, that was a big one, which created a new framework for policing union elections. Amazon.com Services LLC, which outlawed anti-union captive audience meetings. And there's one more, McLaren-Macomb, which barred severance agreements that require workers to waive their labor law rights. So this is one to watch. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Frank Mathews on behalf of the Communication Workers of America coming up next.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LIUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at CWA-union.org. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
Unions are organizing all across America. New units are being formed and existing units are getting stronger. It's never been a more important or a more challenging job. Broadstripes is here to help you do it. Broadstripes is an all-in-one communication and organizing tool. Unions of all sizes rely on us, from nationals like LIUNA and Unite Here to locals throughout the U.S. and Canada. With Broadstripes, you can text and email your members, create digital membership cards, identify leaders, and build the power you need to win. Check us out at broadstripes.com.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. The Iron Workers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 iron worker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great iron worker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Iron Workers Great Lakes District Council today. Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting iwdistrictcouncil.com.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. All the shows are archived there. And thank you so much for listening to America's Workforce. Let's go to our featured guest, longtime sponsor of America's Workforce on behalf of the Communication Workers of America. National website, lots of information posted there, I might add. CWA-union.org. And Frank Mathews serves as Administrative Director for District 4, 5 states in the Midwest: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And we got some good news to talk about. We always have some good news to talk about, despite what's going on politically. And that is the CWA Worker Power Agenda. But first, Frank, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. I saw this on the website last night, and I figured we can kick the show off today because I always like to talk about new contracts for workers, solid contracts with good wages, great benefits. And I understand that AT&T Orange Mobility Workers, represented by your union, the CWA, have ratified a new contract that covers 9,000 workers in customer service, retail, tech support, and other positions across 36 states, along with the District of Columbia. That's a big chunk of America, and I'm sure, well, I assume that your district is a big part of that, right?
Yes, it is. Covers all 5 states, 36 states. It's a big contract. It's a good contract. Back in March, Flash, 95% of the members gave authorization to strike. So it put us in a really good position going into bargaining. These are our AT&T Mobility wireless employees. Many work from home. An incredible wage increase, back pay, continuation of health care, and just everything that's important to our members. And they overwhelmingly supported the ratification, and a real success story, mobilization-wise and sticking together. The group did an excellent job, and the bargaining committee was phenomenal.
We should do a shout out here to Dennis Trainer. Dennis is the vice president of CWA District 1, and this is what he said. This agreement serves as a reminder that strong contracts are not won at the bargaining table, but in the streets and in the shop floor, where CWA members mobilize and fight for their fellow AT&T workers and the customers they serve. That is so right. Good news there. Congratulations to all the folks that worked on this deal, and covering 36 states. That's a very broad territory. All right, let's switch to this legislative conference, which you were a part of last week. CWA members gathered in D.C. to pretty much put together their Worker Power Agenda. Frank, I thank you for sending me this. I counted 17 pieces of legislation that would make things a whole lot better for workers here. And it's funny, too. It's not funny. It's sad, because this is why we do this show. The mainstream media is not talking about this. I mean, there's so much garbage that we're being thrown at here that's just dividing people. You know that. But this is all good stuff. This is legislation that could make our lives better. Talk to me about what happened in D.C., Frank.
It was basically a culmination. I guess I should back up to the end of last year, Flash. CWA, we at CWA decided to actually survey our members and find out what they wanted us to go to the Hill with. At the end of the day, over 9,000 of our members submitted surveys. That's an incredible, a lot of these surveys around the country are done with maybe 1,000, 1,500. We had 9,000 members surveyed. We started out with just having members contact members and saying, hey, here's a link to a survey. Go online. Nobody's going to keep anything. Your name's not kept. All your info's anonymous. We want to know what matters to you. Then at the beginning of this year, we rolled it out media-wise so folks could get a link on their cell phone or their text, go and give this anonymous survey. At the end of the day, the issues that came out, the most important issues in order were job security. And I mean, this isn't a surprise, really. The most important issues were wages and job protections. Affordable health care was right up there. Prices, stopping corporations from taking advantage of people, and ending corruption in D.C. basically the platform got put together with what our members said was important. You're correct. This is the perfect working family, indifferent to what your political party is, that I think any labor union or has come up with as far as a platform. Basically, all of those 16, 17 bills you talked about, mentioned, fall into four buckets. There's a list of bills that address good jobs and strong unions. There's a list of bills that address affordable, reliable health care. There's a list of bills that are geared towards stopping corporations from ripping us off, and a list of a few bills that are geared at ending corporate corruption in our political system. Bills like eliminating members of Congress from being able to trade individual stocks while they're in there. I don't know how many members I talked to last week that were really concerned with the fact that we've got elected officials that are going into Congress, getting elected as members of Congress. They aren't wealthy people when they get elected, but somehow they're millionaires when they come out. I'm not saying that they're all crooked, but it's a coincidence. And our feeling is that if somebody wants to be elected to represent people, if they can't give up trading stocks and they can't give up their playing the market while they're in there, then quite honestly, they don't deserve to be in there representing us. Probably the highlight of the week, though, and I don't know how familiar you are with Congressman Greg Casar from Texas, and we were really honored. It kind of caught the group off guard. He introduced a bill last week geared at changing overtime laws in the country, whereas corporations, if you work overtime, it bumps overtime pay from time and a half to double time. And it would be nationwide. And, these congressmen and congresswomen, when they drop a bill like that, they love doing it with a big boom, they can do it on the steps of the Capitol. They can do it on MS Now. They can do it anywhere they choose. Congressman Casar chose to announce and drop that bill at our conference. The crowd was just really appreciative and really taken back that he chose to do that at our conference. And it was a perfect really place to do it. Basically, as I said, it would make overtime in this country double pay. And he spoke such a great reasoning for the bill. Not only would doubling up the overtime pay from time and a half to double time help American families and help the American worker and help us make ends meet and address all those cost issues, but also it would, corporations right now are basically working families to the bone and with overtime and hours, and it would basically put some emphasis too on, if you're running a company and you're getting by on 10 employees and they're all having to work 40, 50, 60 extra hours a week, maybe instead of working our folks to death, you can also hire some more people. And it would be twofold. It would reward those folks that are working the overtime with double time, but it would also create an incentive for companies to quit trying to, run companies on bare bone employees and actually start hiring in this country again. He made a great point, and we're all in on that bill also.
We're speaking with Frank Mathews. Frank is the District 4 Director, Administrative Director for the Communication Workers of America. We're talking about the legislative conference that happened in the District of Columbia last week. Frank, I mentioned at the top of the podcast there are like 17 different pieces of legislation. You just covered a few. Did all of these get coverage at the conference last week?
Yes, they did. We spent a lot of time on healthcare because that was so very important to members across the country. As you can see, three of the bills, one is a bill totally designed to lower drug costs for American families. The other is a Medicare Dental, Hearing, and Vision Expansion Act. And the third is a Protecting Healthcare and Lowering Cost Act, HR 4849. it was really important that everybody at the conference have a real understanding of each bill, because what transpired is on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons, the thousands of legislative folks that were there for the conference then had made appointments to go to the Hill, and they actually lobbied their member of Congress and took this packet with them, spelling out all of those bills, had a discussion with those members of Congress and or their staffs. They needed to be able to explain and to discuss why each one of these bills is important to working families. It was a great success. We were constantly being told by staff and members of Congress that we would run into how well prepared our legislative folks were and how great the visits went. There's a lot of pictures on our D4 website and in our national website of the visits. It was pretty incredible to see these folks leave the conference from the morning sessions and then be able to go up to the Hill and do working families business up there and represent their members. That's the whole idea. So it was important that they all have a great idea of what each bill did and why.
Yes, things don't have to be the way they are. They can change, and it's all part of the CWA Worker Power Agenda. Frank Mathews, our featured guest. More to come from him right after this. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LIUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LIUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org. Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, to loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families. All working hard for America's working families, for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And don't forget, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. We're talking about a worker power agenda here with Frank Mathews. Frank is the District 4 Administrative Director for the Communication Workers of America, CWA-union.org. We're talking about the legislative conference that they had in Washington, D.C. You know, Frank, one of the things, and we've talked about this on the show so many times, it's actually been 20 years since Congress raised the minimum wage. That was 2006, and it did not take effect until 3 years later. And the minimum wage, this is the federal minimum wage. I mean, this is crazy. I can't even say this with a straight face. Here we are. Federal minimum wage is what people are paying for a gallon of gas in some parts of America. When you think about this, maybe not in the Midwest, but I know on the East and West Coast, for a time, people were paying over $7 for a gallon of gas. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. It actually went into effect in 2009. I could only assume that got a round of applause. And now some states, obviously, have taken upon themselves to raise their wages, and I salute them for that. But what is going on in the halls of Congress? Why can't they do that? What did they say about that last week?
One of the bills, and got a lot of time, was this H.R. 2743 and the Senate bill, a companion bill, Senate 1332, Raise the Wage Act. And to your point, it's been 2009 since it's been increased. One of the biggest sticking points that sticks out in my head is when they explain that based on inflation and the cost of items today and everything, that basically the federal minimum wage of $7.25 has less value now than the minimum wage did actually in 1956. So to put that in comparison, you can, if you got paid your $7.25 based on today's standards and inflation, you actually had more power in 1956 with what the minimum wage was then than it does now, or the $7.25 compared to then. But you get my point. And so, how are working families and families supposed to survive? It leads me to the saying, a few years ago, there was a politician bragging about that in this one state that they'd created 300,000 new jobs. And somebody responded to him, "Yeah, I know, I'm working 3 of them." And that's what having a minimum wage this low does. And we never hear of millionaires and CEOs that are making 400, 500 times the average worker. That wage and their salaries and their compensation seems to be skyrocketing. But to your point, the minimum wage has just been stagnant and set still. And while inflation just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. So this Raise the Wage Act would actually raise the federal minimum wage to $17 per hour gradually over time by 2030. It's not perfect. More needs to be done, but it's a good start. Maybe some folks, people wouldn't have to be working 2 or 3 jobs, allowing for some more time with their family and the like if people actually made a living wage. That's been our charge and our battle here in the labor movement. The theory is a rising tide raises all ships. And as in communities, as our union jobs, we fight for better wages and better health care for our members. The theory is that it pulls along those non-union members too, because of employers have to keep up and want to compete for these people with the union employers. But it's dragging, and some of these employers just don't care, and they're making billions while working families struggle, and folks get by on this pittance of $7.25 an hour. And I mean, these are some hard-working jobs that are paying that. So it's a great bill. It's a great start. It's time for working families and regular workers out there to start getting ahead in this country. And I think this working family agenda addresses that, and it's a good start.
One more piece of legislation I want to talk about is the No Tax Breaks for Outsourcing Act in the House. This is 995, House Resolution 995. In the Senate, it's 409. Now, the administration is trying to, reshore companies by use of tariffs. Now, some of that has happened. Some companies have set up shop here. But here's the part I don't understand. This legislation would eliminate the tax breaks that motivate companies to move jobs overseas. So we are essentially rewarding corporations to move their jobs overseas. Now, I don't understand that. So is anything being done about that right now? Or obviously we need legislation to tell them not to do that? Is that the story?
That's the story. I mean, it's like, our tax code and everything is actually rewarding corporations, as you say, and they get a tax break for the cost to move those American jobs overseas. And I think the time's right, because the whole Buy American and taking care of America theme seems to be hitting a nerve with the voters now. Anybody that doesn't jump on this agenda is going to have a problem come November. That goes hand in hand with the Keep Call Centers in America Act, which is HR 4954. That basically says that any company that offshores a call center job is ineligible for government grants and loans, or any other breaks. And that's the way it should be. Why would we reward a company for moving a call center to India or some other country? This is an issue that has gone on for far too long. Let alone the national security interest. We tell people that don't give your social security number to anybody, but yet corporations hand over our information to many times these third world countries that run these call centers and pay folks 25, 30 cents an hour. And we find that a lot of those countries are target rich for identity theft and that kind of thing. Besides the American worker aspect and paying a living wage, there's a national security and our own ID protection aspect to all this. So it just makes perfect sense. Part of that bill that you spoke of, the Outsourcing Act and the Keep Call Centers Job Act, also requires that folks that don't keep their call centers here, don't keep their jobs here, that when you call in and you want to talk to somebody back in this country, you can. And I urge people to go to our CWA website and look over this Good Jobs and Strong Unions platform if this is their thing, because we also address AI in that, and how many people are getting frustrated when they call in and the calls are being answered by computers. I don't know how many times I personally have called a call center or called for a company. It sends me into an AI computer. All I want to do is keep hitting that button that, hey, let me talk to a service representative. Let me talk to a live person, because quite honestly, what I'm talking about doesn't fit into their little 4 columns that you're trying to gear me into. So yeah, all of those issues are addressed. We're pretty excited about it, Flash, and I hope folks get behind this worker power agenda.
Frank, to your point, I worked in public service for almost 25 years. I retired from the Cleveland Municipal Court just over a year ago, and I can't tell you how many times, because I was trained working in broadcasting. You answer the phone, you talk to your listeners, okay? When I got a call from the public, I right away responded to it. And I can't tell you, Frank, how many times people said, "You mean I'm talking to a real person? Hello? What? You mean you're real?" It was so funny. And I felt good, they felt good, and they got what they wanted done. That's the important thing. It's so darn important to communicate with people, and that's why you're with the Communication Workers of America. Hey, everybody, go to that website, CWA-union.org. Lots of good information there. We're talking about the Worker Power Agenda. And you know what? If you get the right people in office, we can implement that Worker Power Agenda. That's another show. Frank, you take care. We'll talk to you, okay?
Take care, brother.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local 175 in West Virginia. Until then, all of you, have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.